Time now to take a look at the French press with Elena Casas. Hello again, Elena. So what are the papers making of Nicolas Sarkozy's first major rally in Marseille?
Hello, Claire. Well, for right-wing Le Figaro, the most important thing was that Sarkozy defended a certain idea of France. He said France, according to the paper, 88 times in that speech, so it was very much a strong nationalistic focus there. And lots of references to General de Gaulle, the Fifth Republic's first president. The shadow of the general is what they've headlined their editorial today. Now, for a right-wing paper like Le Figaro, for whom de Gaulle is an icon, that serves a few purposes for Sarkozy. On the one hand, it allows him to paint himself as being in the line of these great presidential figures. The French still expect their president to fit a certain mould, the paper says, and he shows by evoking the memory of de Gaulle that he can do that. He's trying to make Hollande look like he doesn't quite have the dignity and gravitas to fill those shoes. There's also the issue of referendums, something that he had recourse to last week when he suggested we should have one about limiting the rights of the unemployed to claim benefits. De Gaulle, the paper points out, was quite keen on referendums and on direct appeals to the French people, something Sarkozy had a lot to say about yesterday, directly appealing to ordinary people. He also, of course, talked a great deal about his love of France in that editorial, something, again, de Gaulle was very associated with patriotism, and the left, according to Le Figaro at least, still has a problem with the idea of France and the love of France, something François Hollande doesn't talk about.
Now, he mentioned sacrifice and how we're living in a time where it's necessary to make sacrifices. Probably not the most popular thing with voters, though, but quite a populist tone that he was striking in that speech.
Yes, indeed. Sarkozy calls on the people is Le Parisien's headline today, something he's been saying a lot since he declared his candidacy last Wednesday. He's had a lot to say about how he wants to be the president of ordinary people, talking about the elected politicians and unions as a kind of elite that he would like to fight against. Slightly ironic, of course, when he himself has become symbolic of a rather different elite, that is to say France's wealthiest. But Le Parisien says he's trying to move away from that image and paint himself really as a completely different person from the one who's been running the country for the last 5 years. He's trying to wipe the slate clean and try and get people to judge him on the new policies that he has for this election and not what he's been doing for the last 5 years. He's actually trying to use the fact that he's now very much the underdog in the polls to his advantage, they say. Yesterday he was saying to voters, help me to bring France together, help me succeed for the sake of France, essentially admitting that he's doing very badly and trying to spin that round and paint himself as outside the system, painting Hollande as, if you like, the natural successor, the person that the system, in inverted commas, has designed as the next president, whereas he is coming from outside. Slightly, of course, ironic, seeing as he has been in power for the last 5 years.
So I imagine this isn't going down too well then on the left.
No, indeed not. Libération think it's hilarious. They say beyond satire in their editorial that a man so associated with elites, with France's riches, with tax breaks for them, with having millionaire friends and having a dinner in one of Paris's most expensive restaurants on the night of the last election, should now be trying to paint himself as the man of the people. Their headline today is C'est l'élite finale, which is a play on words from C'est la lutte finale, which means the final fight, which is famously part of the lyrics of the communist anthem L'Internationale. So they're rather laughing at his trying to pick up these populist clothes. But in their editorial, they say there's no way voters will buy that after 5 years when he's mostly made policy, as far as they're concerned, for France's wealthiest. The communist paper L'Humanité is even more critical. Their front page says Nicolas Sarkozy extremely far to the right. They say he's now engaged in a kind of extreme right primary against Marine Le Pen, trying to grab those National Front voters. But there's no, it's not necessarily proof, at least according to them, that he's winning.
So speaking of Marine Le Pen, what are these other candidates making of Nicolas Sarkozy's speech?
Well, Libération points out that François Hollande is still trying to look as relaxed as possible about the president's entrance into the campaign. He was campaigning at the weekend, but still refuses to mention the man he calls the outgoing candidate by name, and won't resort to any personal insults, saying that would make him look weak. Marine Le Pen, though, of course, is not a woman who's shy of personally insulting other candidates, and she isn't shy necessarily of making some quite strong suggestions. She made a campaign speech yesterday in Lille in which she said that all the meat sold in Paris is secretly halal without consumers knowing it, sort of part of her attempt to really increase the fear of Islam. And the paper says that doesn't necessarily seem to be working with voters, though, as well as it was just a few weeks ago. She's 3 or 4 points down in the polls, and those 3 or 4 points of, if you like, more moderate right-wing voters seem to have gone quite directly over to Nicolas Sarkozy. La Croix points out in its editorial, which is called Nicolas, François and some other people, that most of the other candidates beyond Nicolas Sarkozy and François Hollande are falling slowing down in the polls now as the race tightens between just those two men.
OK, the gap between them still pretty big. Thank you very much, Elena, for that look at the French press.